a little taller because of Neanderthal genes.
Wow.
All kinds of things like that. So if you date the human story even back, and I start our story as wild animals in Africa, and I bring us in one of the early chapters, in the first chapter really, up to the point where we're leaving Africa, going into Europe, going into Asia. And of course that process, again, if you start with Neanderthals, it goes back 800,000 years out of Africa into the rest of the world. But the Neanderthals never get to the Americas. But when modern humans, we emerged about 315,000 years ago in Africa, and when we spread out of Africa and replaced Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Asia, and finally get to Siberia about 45,000 years ago, as soon as there's a possibility for getting farther east, in other words, into North America, we take advantage of it. And I mean, as I argue in this book, the reason we do this is kind of one of the reasons why all of us love to find spots where it's a beautiful morning. I'm out here on this mountain. There's not another soul in sight. It's just me and the world. That compulsion, I think, is really ancient, and it's what drew us out of Africa to other parts of the world to start with. And what we're looking for are animals that have never encountered us before because they're naive about humans as predators. So this compulsion to travel, finally to get to the great plum of the Americas as the last great spot we get to on Earth, drives us to the point where, I don't know if you caught the news out of White Sands National Park about 3 or 4 years ago about the footprints that were discovered there, 23,000 years old. I mean, that's at the height of the glacial maximum, man. That's when the ice is at its greatest extent. And somehow people have gotten out of Asia, we think probably along the coastlines, into what is now the United States. And the place that always seemed to draw them is the country south of the Rocky Mountains in what is New Mexico and Arizona. And these people managed to get 23,000 years ago into what is now New Mexico and left 79 footprints that have been carbon dated based on seeds that their feet crushed as they walked along the marshy shore of this lake. So we know that people probably coming down the coastlines, maybe in some kind of craft, managed to get here as long ago as 23,000 years. Wow. But what really, of course, propels the great human migration into America is when the ice sheets finally open at about 16,000 years ago as the glacial maximum begins to recede. There's an ice-free corridor that opens from Alaska down into Alberta and Montana. And at that point, you get this massive migration. Probably not massive to start with, maybe not very many people at all, but they encounter a wild new world, a world that is populated by some creatures they recognize, many ground sloths and so forth, humans have never seen before. And so we enter this American paradise of animals some 16,000 years ago in large numbers of humans, and spread within about 3 centuries all the way to the tip of South America. It's kind of one of the great colonization stories in world history.
That's amazing. Now, at this point in time, what weapons do we think that they were using to hunt with? Were they using atlatls? Were they using spears? Were they using a combination of these things?
They were definitely using, so the first successful group that sort of spreads coast to coast. I mean, our first American culture that spreads from the Pacific to the Atlantic as a consistent culture of people. And I titled this particular chapter in the book, Clovicia the Beautiful, because they establish a world that lasts longer than the United States has lasted so far. Their America the Beautiful, Clovicia the Beautiful, lasts well over 300 years. And they're probably using spears, but they have come up with a great new technology, which is the fluted point. They figured out a way, and fluted points aren't found in earlier times, even in Siberia. So this was a purely American invention. They figured out a way to take flint points and flute the base on either side so that you can solidly and very securely attach a spear to them, and they'll remain in place without flipping off or breaking off. So the fluted point is one of their great technological inventions. But the other thing that they bring to the game, Joe, is they come out of a tradition of at least 40,000 generations of hunting big animals. I mean, they know how to do this at literally a professional level. They are extremely good at it. I mean, one of the stories I tell in this early chapter, Clovicia the Beautiful, which is the second chapter of the book, is of an episode that takes place in southern Arizona, what's now southern Arizona, about 13,000 years ago, when a group of Clovis hunters surround a herd of mammoths. And in this herd is a herd bull, a herd cow, and 13 calves in adolescence. There are 3 archaeological sites associated with this particular episode. In one site, the most westerly, all 13 calves in adolescence, archaeologists found dead in one spot, each with a single Clovis point in its body. East of there, in 2 different locations, the herd bull was found. He had run about 3 or 4 miles. He had 2 Clovis points in him, and he finally bled out and died. But they found the cow about 8 miles away. She had 8 Clovis points in her before she died, indicating to the archaeologists who've studied these sites that the cow, in classic elephant fashion, had fought to defend those calves and those adolescents. Mm-hmm. She had put up a huge fight to try to defend them, and ultimately she hadn't been successful. They had all been killed. She runs away and finally dies with 8 Clovis points in her.
Wow.
But that's one episode out of, I mean, we have no idea how many. There are something like 78 Clovis